welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki, I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio, and today we're going to be talking about pet loss. I think this is one that will strike home with pretty much everybody, and everybody I know anyway. So, as I said, we're talking about pet loss today, and this is not necessarily just losing your dog or your cat. This could be any pet. I've known people with birds, with snakes, lizards, reptiles, sugar gliders, bats, spiders. There's any myriad of pets out there. So this is all inclusive. I promise I'm not just catering to dog and cat owners here as well. To throw in my own little anecdote, this past October, I had to say goodbye to my best friend in the entire world, Yona. She was coming up on 19 years old. She had been sick. She'd been sick most of her life, honestly. I'm genuinely shocked she made it as long as she did. But I adopted her from a foster shelter here in Columbus when I was just out of college, kind of had, one of my first apartments, and I wanted a cat, you guys, so bad. I've wanted a cat my whole life, and my dad was not keen on pets, so I was not allowed to have a cat or a dog growing up. I had hamsters and guinea pigs, things like that. So I was no stranger to having pets, but it was always like the little rodents and a fish here or there that lived a year or two, and that was about it. So man, as soon as I got that apartment and had a little bit of money, I was like, dang it, I'm going to go get me a cat. And I did. And oh my goodness, I could talk all day about Yuna, and I won't bore you guys to tears talking about my cat, but I don't know why, but I wanted a female cat, and the litter she was from, she was the only female. But when I went to see this litter, first of all, she's a blue cream tortie, so she's a muted tortie, however you want to call it. So she had just the most beautiful markings, and she was in a litter of 5, I believe. And when I went to see them, the 4 boys were just romping all over each other, doing what kittens do. And she was just kind of sitting in the corner like, I don't like this. And I'm like, oh, honey, you are me. I knew right away we were kindred spirits at that point. I was like, I don't like this either. You're coming home. So little girl came home with me, and immediately, like in the car ride home, she was curled up in my lap and so happy. So I knew then that we were soulmates, and we were. So 19 years together, she saw me through 2 marriages, the loss of my brother, handfuls of jobs, she saw me through so much, and she was just always the one that was there for me. So losing her was absolutely devastating. Now, full disclosure, I did have her put down, because of her health issues. Like I said, she'd been sick. She'd had kidney issues from the time she was maybe 5. So she's always been sickly off and on. She also got real fat. She got up to 18 pounds, and even the vet was like, girl need to lose weight bad. And I think that's why she had so many of her other health issues, is just, I spoiled her too much. I gave her too many treats. But anyway, that's beside the point. So we did have to have her put down. It was a gut-wrenching decision, but let's go ahead and talk about that now. Let's talk about when you have to lose a pet to euthanasia, right? I feel like most of us feel that it's the humane and the right thing to do, right? We're taking away their suffering. We're letting them ease quietly into, the next life or whatever's after. And I could preach on, and I won't, about how unfair it is that we can do this for our pets, but not our family members. We can now in 10 states, regardless. But they have to make that. Anyway, sorry. I'll go on a tangent. We don't need that right now. Different topic. But we oftentimes, I would hope anyway, that when an animal is put down, it's for, to ease suffering. There are cases where There are other reasons that I won't get into because I will get angry, and they don't have much to do with what we're talking about right now. But losing a pet to euthanasia it's difficult, right? Because you kind of, I know for me personally, I knew it was the right decision, but I absolutely had moments of, am I making the right choice? Am I murdering my pet? Am I killing my best friend? And I know that we made the right decision. And I know that I wasn't murdering my pet, but it's still, it's hard. It's hard to know that you made that choice and they didn't. And they can't tell us, although in their own way, she told me she was ready in her way. I knew and quick side note, just what baffled me is she hated everybody, like, except me, and she kind of tolerated my husband. In the last couple years, she got to really, she wanted to, like, sit next to him on the couch from time to time, or she does this thing if she likes you, so only to me and him, where she'll sit beside you and just put one paw on your arm, and that's it. She would do that to him. And me, obviously, she'd curl up under the covers and want me to be the big spoon. But whenever any people came over, she would either hide, hiss, growl. She was never, like, combative. She never bit anybody, but she didn't like people. And she specifically really didn't like men for some reason. I don't know what it was, but most men that came to the house, she was very not okay with. So the doctor that came we went through Lap of Love, and I cannot speak highly enough of them. I'm not sponsored. They're not giving me any money for this. I'm just mentioning their name because they were an absolutely amazing organization, and I've heard nothing but great things from other people. So Lap of Love, use them. They will come to your house, which is what I preferred, because apart from hating people, she didn't like to leave the house. Every trip to the vet was, oh my God, I made a YouTube video about it once a while ago, about the trauma involved in taking this poor cat to the vet. It was traumatic for everybody. So regardless, when the doctor came to, put her down, it was a male doctor, and I was like, oh no, she's going to be so angry. Like, I was worried enough about this whole situation, but she was on the couch. We spent our last, like, hour or two on the couch hanging out. And he came over and she was like, oh, who's this? Okay. And she just looked, like, aware that somebody was there, but not angry. She didn't hiss at him once, and she let him pet her and touch her without fighting. It may have helped that I was there with her. But yeah, it was amazing to me. And I went off on such a tangent, I forget where the hell I was before this. So we'll just move on. Anyway, there's bound to be that feeling of guilt involved when euthanasia is involved. So going back to just the grief part of this and not necessarily the actual death of the pet, there is so much grief involved in pet loss that is very, well, I don't want to say it's different than loss of a human person in your life. Well, every grief is different. Right. I've mentioned that a million times, and I'll continue to mention it. Every grief is different, and every person is different. But even, like, the grief I felt for the loss of Yuna versus the loss of my brother were very different. And I can't say one was better or worse than the other, because they were very different. But it feels like the loss of a pet is just, it almost feels more painful, right? And I can't. That's not a for certain thing. For some people, obviously, a human loss it might be more painful than a pet loss, or vice versa, regardless. But pet loss can feel incredibly traumatic. And there are some good reasons for that. So, again, we all respond to our griefs differently. And how you experience your grief is going to depend on a lot of factors. What griefs you've already suffered, your age, personality, your relationship with the pet, circumstances surrounding their death, things like that. But also the role the animal played in your life could be a huge factor in your grief, right? So, for example, if you had a pet that was just kind of there, but you didn't really hang out with a lot, or, this was a pet that belonged to a former roommate that dumped them with you, or, not saying you don't care, but it's going to be different than a pet that you actively snuggled with every single day and, poured your heart out to. I'll go on and on about Una being my soulmate, but she was. Like, I couldn't go through one day without holding her, hugging her, taking a nap with her. She slept with me most nights. I told her everything. Told her things I've never told human people. She was kind of my therapist too. So the grief for her was very different than, for example, the grief with my brother. Obviously, I love my brother, and I can't say the grief was less for him because it was not. But we had a different relationship. I didn't see my brother every single day. And we weren't cuddly siblings. Like, we didn't hug all that much, And again, I didn't talk to him every day. And there were a lot of circumstances with our relationship. But Una was like my whole world for so long. And I was her whole world, So it can be very, very devastating that way. And pets tend to bring a lot of comfort to us that some humans can't, right? Because they look at us differently than other humans do. My mom's always reminding me of this thing she read once, and I think I've seen this too, about how your pet is part of your world, but to them, you're their entire world, because you are. Like, they only know a little bit of the world. We know all of it, or a good chunk of it. They only know you. So you are their entire world, and the way they look at you and the way they treat you because of that, when it's gone, it's hard, right? So just given the amount of comfort they bring to you, it's understandable that losing them can be just absolutely devastating for a long time. And we've discussed, we probably will get another cat at some point, or a couple. I'd like to get a couple, like a bonded pair, and we definitely want adult cats, but I'm never going to have another Una. There's never going to be another cat in this world that was Una, ever. And I mean, part of that is the history she and I had, and, the different points of which we grew up together in a way. But again, someone else could talk about Una this whole podcast. I'm sorry. So I will not ever tell you how to grieve because that's for you to figure out. But there are ways you can work with your grief, right? Things you can do to kind of help cope with your grief. And again, you'll never stop hearing me say this. You never get over your grief. You learn to live with it. It becomes part of you. Okay? Just remember that. But some different things you can do in working on grieving your pet is, first of all, realize that your grief is valid. I don't know what order I'm posting all these podcasts in because I'm pre-recording a lot of them. But hopefully I've already posted the one on disenfranchised grief. As we talked about in disenfranchised grief, there's a lot of things in life that people, society in general view as lesser griefs, which there is no lesser grief. Grief is grief. But don't let anybody tell you it was just a pet. It was just a cat. It was just a dog. It was just a snake. It was just a lizard. It was just an iguana. Like, it's never just. No grief is just. Your grief is valid. And also recognize that your grief is going to look different than anybody else's. Talk about that too. No two griefs are the same. So you may have a close friend that just lost their dog last year and they seem to be quote unquote over it, in a few months, and you have lost your pet and it's been a year and you're still just devastated. That's okay. Your grief is not going to be the same as your friend. Nobody's grief is the same. Other things you can do is just find ways to remember them. You can create physical memorials, like a mini. I have like what I call my mini shrine for Una. I have the box with her ashes and my favorite photo of her framed, and a beautiful handwritten card from the vet that put her down. Just his words like really spoke to me. He said some lovely things about how he could just see, just being in her home, how impactful. Oh, I'm gonna start crying, you guys. How impactful her passing was to us. So I have all these things with the little candle holder in front of it, and I'll light a candle from time to time. I still talk to her. I walk, because I put her little shrine like right where her bed always was, and she was just always in her bed, So I walk by and tell her good morning and good night, and I love her and things like that. So those are things you can do. There are definitely support groups out there. If you go to Lap of Love's website, which I'll link in the show notes, they have support groups, like online support groups that meet. I don't remember if it's once a week or once a month. Sorry about that. But they have online support groups, which is cool. I'm sure you can find local support groups. Yeah. Also, check in with other members of your family that, this pet may have quote unquote belonged to, your spouse or your kids. Make sure they're okay too, Check in with them and let them know, especially children, let them know that their grief is okay and whatever they're feeling is okay. Right? Okay. There are, again, everything is normal. You might feel sad. You might feel guilty. You might feel lonely. I can't express to you how lonely I have felt since Yuna's been gone. She was such a big part of my life, and I don't really have a ton of friends to begin with, so losing her I'm still feeling it. Like, I'm still lonely. All of those reactions are normal. Don't ignore your pain. Don't distract yourself from it all the time. I talk about this in any grief. You have to face your grief, and you have to work with it, not against it. Don't let people tell you how to feel. Never, ever, ever let anybody tell you it was just whatever it was. Or that you need to move on or get over it, or it's time to move on. There's no timeline for grief. Ugh. Anyway, you might find comfort in other people who've lost pets. About a week or two after we had to put Yuna down, one of my good friends had to put down her dog. And she reached out to me to ask, details about the process, but also for a little bit of comfort, She was, what am I in for? I was able to help her with that. We were able to kind of lean on each other because my pain was still very raw at that time. Don't forget to self-care. I feel like is one of those terms that's overused and a little weird, but take care of yourself, right? Cut yourself some slack. If you need to take I took 2 days off. We put her down on a Friday, and I took that whole day off work. I was like, I can't even possibly be thinking about work right now. You need to take some time to yourself. The whole next day, I just kind of spent, grief cleaning, because that's what I do. So I did a lot of housework. But there was some grief with that too, because I just remember sweeping up some piles of cat hair and just losing it, But that's okay. And anytime your grief gets to a point where you can't function and you feel like it's really genuinely affecting your daily life and your other relationships, it's okay to seek professional help. It's absolutely okay to seek a therapist, right? I was in a grief support group a while back, and one of the members in that group was there because of the loss of her dog, right? Most other people there were there more about, their parent. They lost a parent, a spouse, a good friend. And there was one lady there who lost her dog. And I could just see in her whole demeanor just how devastating it was for her. And my whole body just ached for her pain. Anyway, it's okay to seek professional help, even if it's a pet. Because it's not just a cat. It's not just a dog. It's not just an iguana. It's not just. There is no just with grief. Anyway, it's okay to get help if you need it. Some other little things, you can, make sure you're staying connected with your friends, not even just friends that have suffered similar losses, but be around other people if you need. Let them help you. Let them support you. If you're not being supportive, walk away from them for a little while. You don't need that in your life. You might have to reshape some factors of your life. I mean, there's obviously the physical things of not taking that pet for a walk or not grooming, losing those little rituals. But you might just have to change some of the aspects of your life where if you found taking care of Yuna was a big pain in my butt, but also a big joy because I knew I was helping her, right? And I had to find other ways to fulfill those needs. And I had to find other joys in my life besides, obviously I had them. I just needed to kind of invest myself in those too. So I went on a bit, mostly talking about my own cat. And I have had other pets, you guys. I had a cat that I adopted for a while. I had him a couple years. I believe I've spoken about Little Guy in one of my previous episodes. And it just wasn't working out with him and Yuna. And it was, everything in the house was just turmoil for the entire time he was here. He just loved me and I loved him, but I loved Yuna, but they hated each other. And me trying to balance time with both of them was a nightmare, right? Because neither one, I feel so terrible. Yuna was only okay with my husband, and little guy, didn't really like him at all. He was okay with Brendan, but there were times where you could tell he just didn't want Brendan around. And it got to be too much. And he had behavioral issues because of it. And we had to take him to another home. But he's with two amazing humans who have actually one of his brothers from his litter. So he's so happy. Everything worked out very well. It could not have gone better. But that was obviously a loss for me as well. I guess you could say I rescued a cat from somebody I had a good friend whose spouse was starting to hoard cats, and he was threatening to throw them out, and he wouldn't actually do that, but he was like begging people to please take a cat or two. So I took one home, and she was just lovely, and she and Yuna didn't get along either, but it was at least less traumatizing. One lived upstairs, one lived downstairs, and it was fine. They even ate in separate places. It didn't matter. They did just like, all right, there's another cat here, whatever. But her kidneys failed, and there was no coming back for her, so we had to have her put down too. And that was obviously difficult, Anyway, I've blah-blahed on quite a bit. So I guess end all be all. If you lost a pet, or if you know you will lose a pet one day, your grief's valid. Don't ever let anybody tell you how to grieve, and don't ever, ever let anybody tell you it's just a cat, it's just a dog, it's just a snake, it's just a whatever. I don't care if it's a goldfish, Goldfish aren't exactly the most cuddly pets, but maybe that goldfish meant a lot to you. Doesn't matter. Your grief is yours, right? I'll say that to the end of time. Your grief is yours, and your feelings are valid. Okay, now the time in the podcast where we ask the question of the week or thought of the week from the death deck. I'm going through the cards. I'm picking one at random. I am not looking at ahead of time. I'm just going to grab one. Okay. Final supper. Given a chance to choose your very last meal, what would you indulge in? For me, and I'm just going to answer these too. I would probably have to... You know what? I have two choices here. I could go for something I really love, like I could just have a giant bucket of buffalo wings or maybe a burrito the size of my head. Or I could go a more morbid route and eat a big plate of mussels because I'm definitely allergic to shellfish. So if I'm going to go out suffocating, I don't know. I'm going to go with a big bucket of buffalo wings and some french fries and a whole lot of ranch dressing I never eat ranch dressing, so I just smother in that. Anyway, that's mine. All right. Well, don't forget to check me out on Patreon. By no means do you have to, but it'd be cool if you did. But I get it. God knows I support like 12 Patreons, and it gets expensive. If we could support them all, wouldn't we? Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please check me out at nikkithedeathdoula.com. Feel free to message me if you have questions, comments, anything you want to share. Tell your friends about me. I'd really appreciate it. I'm not making any money off this, but it sure would be nice to at least just kind of spread my message a little bit. If I provide comfort to one person, my job is done. Thank you so much. Have a good week. Good Grief was brought to you by me. You can find me online at nikkithedeathdoula.com. Today's episode was produced by me. Research and scripts written by me. Your host is me. Editing and sound design also me. Music is not me. Music is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod. License information can be found at filmmusic.io/standard-license. Special thank you to my best friend and husband for constantly reassuring me that I don't suck.